All right. My name is James Pepper. I'm the chair of the Vermont Cannabis Control Board. Today is Wednesday, October 15th, 2025, and I call this special meeting to order. So again, this is a meeting, not our regular meeting, but this is our mid-month meeting where we deal with issues that can't wait until our regular meeting at the end of the month. We have a few late applications to review and a few license amendment issues. So before we get to those, I will ask if there's any changes to the agenda that we need to make.
Nope.
All right, then I'll open for public comment, and I don't see anyone that's joined from the public. So I'll close the public comment window and move to Olga.
Somewhere. Yeah. All right, here we are, our October mid-month board meeting. So a few slides here. We'll start with 8 renewal applications that were completed later than 30 days prior to the expiration, the deadline set by Rule 115.2. As of this morning, our staff has found that all of these renewal applications are complete and sufficient to demonstrate legal eligibility to renew. The supporting documents, including required narratives explaining late filings, and also a list of the licensees for whom this is not the first time when their submission has been late, have been shared with the board prior to this meeting. Our staff recommends that all of these late and complete applications be accepted by the board pursuant to Rule 115.2b and approved for issuance subject to any contingencies.
Any questions for Olga?
Nope.
So I've read the staff notes on all of these, as well as the licensee narratives. And I have a few comments that I'd like to make from what I'm seeing. So as you mentioned, there are a number of businesses on this list that this is their second, or in some cases, their third late renewal. And I'm also seeing businesses that seem to be ignoring our staff, despite repeated outreach to make sure that they're meeting these deadlines. So I know it's a complicated industry. I know that renewals require coordination with, the tax department and insurance companies that aren't always on the same timeline. But that kind of situation is starting to kind of make my patience run thin. I don't get repeated calls from the judiciary when my law license is about to expire. If I'm late, it gets suspended and I have to pay a reinstatement fee. And I can't practice law. If you kind of extend that to the cannabis industry, if we suspended people that were late, then they couldn't go into their cultivation facility. They'd have to lock the doors of their retail location. So, I mean, we tried to build in some flexibility early on in our rules because we knew that, renewals were essentially like applying anew. That's kind of how the legislature set it up. But we've kind of taken great pains to reduce the burden of renewal. So, to me, there's even less excuse for people that are on their second or third late renewal. It's, it's a drain on our resources, and it's really unfair to all the licensees that take this aspect of their kind of business seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think moving forward, we're going to have no choice but to start imposing a deadline as a deadline a little bit more scrupulously. There's a reason we're sending out notices 120 days before your license expires and asking for things for 30 days before your license expires. So this doesn't happen. We talked last year at nauseum how we understand in year one, we're all getting used to this, as you alluded to, so on and so forth. My patience is at the end of its rope when it comes to Like for a while, I felt like we weren't seeing a lot of late or incomplete applications, and they're starting to pop up again. And that's working counter to some of the decisions we tried to make through streamlining some renewal stuff from a rulemaking perspective. Maybe the tech is still jumping into sync with some of those decisions. But at the end of the day, we've all got a job to do. Need people to meet us halfway.
I agree. I mean, we're in year 3, 4 of doing this. And so we've all, our staff and the industry included, have had plenty of practice on how to do this. And to your point, while we've had changes in that time and what renewal might look like, the effort has been to make that a simpler process rather than a more complicated process to avoid late and incomplete applications.
Yeah. So I don't know if we want to do anything right now with the kind of the second or third repeat offenders, but I certainly am starting to kind of feel like, there's no more excuses left for some of these folks.
Like you, I read the documents we get. I don't remember who on the list is in what category, but perhaps, I mean, maybe not today, but maybe going forward, we could, now that we've put it out, that this is how we view it, maybe going forward, we could approach it differently.
Yeah.
I know nobody's from the public watching this meeting, so maybe we can figure out a couple other ways to get that message on what we talked about here today through to all active licensees.
Yeah. And maybe we should pursue a kind of reinstatement fee with the legislature so that there's a clear path. You're suspended, you can't operate, and until you pay your original fee and a reinstatement fee. So there's actually kind of a graduated sanction or penalty for just this. The other issue I'd like to address, which came up in some of the narratives, is around fee payment upon submission of the renewal application. So this is new as of our latest rule amendment. We did give a kind of a grace period for a lot of folks. I gave them a lot of fair warning, but I do have sympathy for the folks that, are caught up in a new process and didn't kind of prepare for this. But, if we can go back to the rationale for why we decided this, I mean, one, it's just really important that there's continuous licensure, which includes a payment of the fee. If you get approved on the 15th and your license expires on the 16th and you haven't paid your fee, technically you are not in compliance, but we just found that was the case. So, and then of course, having our staff having to track down people that haven't paid fees after they've been approved by the board is just a total waste of our time.
We have no collections mechanism, right? We don't have a collections department. We don't, we don't have a mechanism for
And
that.
it shouldn't be our licensing division's responsibility for making sure that they chase down every single person who is conducting business here. It should be the business owner who is responsible for making sure they are their application has been deemed complete and they have paid their fee.
So this just because it was mentioned in the narratives, just wanted to kind of just revisit the rationale for why we made that decision and make sure everyone who's listening today or just kind of hasn't thought about this is prepared at the time of renewal to kind of pay the fee when you hit submit on the application. That being said, if there's no more discussion about these applications, is there a motion to approve the staff recommendations?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to accept and approve the late and complete applications that are listed here. Issuance subject to any final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Right. So next slide here, we have one late and incomplete renewal application. So as explained in the application materials supplied to the board members prior to this meeting, the main issues for this applicant are, first, that they have not yet obtained required status with the Department of Taxes pursuant to 31 BSA 3113. Second, they are unable to provide a lease demonstrating an ongoing right to occupy their premises. And third, they have not paid their license fees. Because the application is materially insufficient, our staff recommend that the board decline under Rule 115.2B to accept this late application. If the board does not extend this license, it will expire on October 18th of 2025, and the licensee will have to halt operations. With that said, if expiration comes to pass, it may be appropriate for the board to serve a health and safety order to secure inventory. And of course, the licensee has 60 days under Rule 115.2 in which to be reinstated in full, reinstated if all of the outstanding requirements are met during that time frame. So a lot here for you to consider.
So obviously paying a fee, we just talked about the importance of that. But to me, like, we really just can't waive the good standing with the tax department. It's just that's totally outside of our control. So I'm inclined to accept the staff recommendation that we not extend.
Would you like a motion?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I move that the board find that the application is insufficient for the board to take up for consideration.
And I will second.
Any discussion?
No.
No.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Ready to move on? Okay. So next we have a proposed license amendment for location change under Rule 117. Paula Legacy LLC is a Tier 2 outdoor cultivator looking to change locations within the same municipality. It's in Berlin. The supporting documentation has been shared with the board. Again, to confirm, the new location has already received a passing inspection. Berlin does not have a local control commission, and the applicant's transition plan includes a transfer of previously harvested product to the new location under the supervision of a CCB compliance agent. An approval at today's mid-month meeting is necessary to align with that plan. The license renewal timeline will be unchanged. And our licensing division recommends the approval here. And of course, if the board has any questions concerning private business details, I'm sure an executive session is an option.
So this person likely does not have any plants in the ground at this point.
No, it's only the harvested.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no local control board. And I know you've asked this question before and I don't remember the answer, but do we ask licensees when they move to review whatever local rules there might be in terms of around siting, outdoor siting?
Yes, it's part of our application materials.
Okay.
There is a lot there. There is a line there.
Thank you for reminding me.
They're moving within the same town, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But different property.
Different
So
property. Yeah. Could
My understanding is they didn't have proper drying and storage operations at that site and wanted to kind of time it so that they could harvest what they had in the ground and then move everything to the new site so that they could do the post-harvesting activities
Great.
that they need
All right.
to. So maybe they found a more permanent home or more appropriate home moving forward.
Any questions? Anything else for Olga? Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to accept the licensing amendment listed with issuance subject to final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
Oh, a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So next, we have another proposed license amendment. This one is to change principal. A change of a principal under Rule 117. So this business, Wizards Bud LLC, is a Tier 1 indoor cultivator looking to add a new principal. The new principal is not affiliated with any existing licenses. They have successfully undergone a required background check, and all documents required to facilitate this change have been received by our licensing team. And our licensing team recommends approval here as well.
All right. So it's pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
Any questions?
Mhm.
All right, is there a motion to approve the principal change?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendation to accept the principal change that's listed with issuance subject to any final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. And I have just, I believe, one more for you. So here we have a licensed retailer looking to change the location of the establishment. They propose to operate in Poultney rather than in Rutland. The controlling rule 1.7.2 is shown on this slide in quotations. The licensee has provided supporting documentation, including a market analysis. The analysis and all related documents have been shared with the board members. Now, staff believe the evidence supports the required finding and recommend that the board grant the amendment, subject to usual contingencies before opening, particularly related to a satisfactory inspection of the new location.
So this is our first one of these. I don't want to set a bad precedent here for reviewing these. We did get a document that really looked at Poultney and then the surrounding kind of the abutting towns versus Rutland and some of the abutting towns. Was that sufficient for you? I went a little bit above and beyond what they submitted. But I'm wondering if that was the kind of information that you need to make this decision, or if you want to go further than what was received.
So without having anything more specific for a licensee to meet, I was comfortable with what they submitted, particularly given that they're looking at a town that has no other retail location in it.
So essentially Poultney opted in, but nobody ever took advantage of that opt-in before we closed the window. Okay.
So just because we got a lot of public comment about our proposed retail siting rule, that said, don't just look at the town, because people don't really care about municipal borders. They care about kind of distance to the shop. Look at a catchment area. So what I did was I pulled up the mapping app from VCGI, and I did a kind of 15-mile radius from all kind of corners of Poultney, and got the kind of towns that are within 15 miles and took their populations, compared it to the towns that are 15 miles from all the borders of Rutland. And this would actually benefit, this would increase retail kind of geographic distribution. Not by a lot, but it would improve the situation in both of those towns.
I think Fairhaven's close to Poultney, and they have, I don't know what the mileage, did that cross into Fairhaven from your map?
Yeah.
I didn't go the extra mile for this like you did, so.
Yeah, there's actually 28 towns that are within 15 miles of both of these. There's a lot of overlap between the two, but the total population within 15 miles of Poultney, and I don't know exactly where, I didn't see the address for the shop, so I just did it from the borders of Poultney. There's 59,406 people as of the 2020 census within 15 miles of Poultney. And there's 14 retail shops currently. And then within 15 miles of Rutland, there's 57,176, and there's 16 shops. So if you moved one from Rutland to Poultney, there'd be 15 and 15. And the population within 15 miles of Poultney is greater. Poultney also touches the New York border. So I didn't look at shops in New York.
Right. Well,
But
that makes sense. But the other part of that, though, is when you're looking at population, particularly in the rural parts of Vermont, Are we talking about along Route 7 where commerce typically happens? Or are you talking about down dirt roads? Or are you
Right.
talking about like downside? So that is part of what I find challenging about retail density
Yeah.
in general. Because you might have more along Route 7 that hit certain towns, but that's because that is where commerce happens. And
Right.
that's where all the gas stations are. That's
Right.
where the grocery stores are. That's where all the commerce is, you know, so it's a challenge.
I don't want to offend anybody in Polton. I'm just not familiar with this part of the state, but I did do some quick looking at it on a map. Looks like there is like grocery stores there, at least like a Shaw's. Like, I mean, I only say that because the town I live in doesn't have anything worth anything from a commerce perspective. So it looked like Polton may have been kind of the center of a spoke of smaller towns surrounding it, including some on the New York side. I'm not as familiar with them, but it's south of Fairhaven, southeast of Rutland, and southwest of Rutland, southwest of Castleton. But it looked like some of those other towns that did not either have a retail store or had opted in. It looked like Polton was kind of a place where people engage in commerce that are below, what's it, Route 4 that kind of runs into New York.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, 22A. And then that area, in terms of, I mean, you often bring up tourism. There's quite a bit of summer tourism that happens in that area.
I've driven through, on my way to like the Saratoga Springs area, you know what I mean? But no, I think if we're thinking about it in terms of evening out retail density, I think it may be a closer call given your analysis than I thought of initially in my head, in terms of evening out from 16 and 14 to 15 and 15 per 15-mile radius. But I still think it helps the situation in Rutland as well. Yeah.
I mean, the census data that I'm looking at, is not distinguishing between people that are over 21 or under 21. There's no tourism aspect to it. So I'm just wondering, what we do here today will have some influence on what people submit in the future. Wondering if that's the right kind of analysis, or do we need anything? Do we expect anything different? Do we want anything different? Is 30, is essentially a 30-mile, circle around the town the right distance for a catchment area? Is that about how far people are willing to drive, essentially 30 miles round trip?
I don't know.
I drive about, honestly, 20 to 30 miles round trip to go to the grocery store from my house.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't live in Polton or in that area of the state, but it's 10 to 15 minutes to Rutland. I know you're looking at me like that's crazy. It's like 10 to 15 minutes to Northfield.
My family's from Randolph. Like, it's not a big deal, but still.
Well, I live between Randolph and Northfield, so it's 10 or 15 minutes one way and 10 or 15 minutes the other way. So you put those together, then you're at 20 miles.
Yeah. I think it's hard to say what. I don't know. It feels like we're making a rule without making a rule.
Well, this is just the kind of like the criteria that I feel is important, but it could be that we don't have to establish the criteria that you want to look, and it could be variable depending on the actual situation.
Right. I mean, like, I'm comfortable with what they gave us. Sorry, but I get what you're saying is that whatever we accept is going to set some level of precedent. Right. The fact that they're moving to a place that has no other retailer, and it, even with the analysis you did, still seems like a positive.
Yep.
That still seems good to me.
If we were to approve it,
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I should thank Be Well and its council, who were very patient with us in thinking through, what is the board going to want? Because this is the first time you've ever had to answer this question. In speaking with them, one of the things that we came to was sort of, you need to make a persuasive showing of, the conclusion you need to reach, which is that relocation net would improve the geographic distribution. And I think it's a little bit context specific in the case that, they did us a favor. They're moving out of one of our most concentrated areas to a place where we know at a minimum, the local voters envisioned what's an appropriate number, and it was more than zero because they voted for, and right now they're zero. So we can infer they wouldn't be too upset. So they kind of did us a favor because they started in a very concentrated place where probably most moves would be an improvement.
Yeah.
But you're touching on something important, which is if this is sort of not very close, you're going to get a close one eventually. And you might want a more specific set of empirics that you ask the folks for. To be fair to these guys, they said, is this enough? And I said, well, I really don't know what enough is. That's up to the board. But I think the important thing is that you've made your case that they can get to that conclusion. And if this were a closer case, maybe we'd be talking about doing complex modeling and mapping. But fortunately, once you've answered the question, you don't need to go deeper and deeper and deeper. But we definitely should be prepared for a close case in the future. Fortunately, I think this isn't so close, so it's a little bit easier to rest on what they've provided and what you've been able to get from census data.
Maybe, I guess the question is, do we want to ask our applicants to look for that type of census data so that the board does not have to go through this exercise? That's
Yes.
maybe is the question moving forward.
And I think that lands in, do we want like a standard form where we collect, that has definite fields where we ask people to go do the research and bring it with their applications?
Which we could entertain in terms of the logistics with the licensing team, if that's the direction the board wants us to pursue or investigate.
I think all that would be great. I still think just given the nature of the state, it's going to be a little subjective at the end of the day, and it's really specific to that part of the state and how folks interact from a commerce perspective with their neighboring towns.
Yeah.
Which is all the more reason that this is so challenging.
Right.
And I think we want to know from a local perspective, I've driven through Pulteney many times, have camped down there, but I don't live there. So it feels like I'm making a decision that we should hear from, towns on in terms of how they want the distribution of cannabis in their
Right.
counties.
I think that makes sense. Fortunately, as Gabe alluded to, like voters have said that they want to host retail and there isn't one right now. So
Right.
we've
So
got at least a
yes.
hunch. But moving forward, considering how this calculus might be a little bit more complicated, I think that makes sense.
So is 15 miles away from the town edge the kind of standard that we'd want, like at a minimum we'd want to see? Is 15 miles the right number? I mean,
I don't know if you're talking about Burlington and South Burlington and Williston.
right, exactly.
15 miles is a different conversation
Right.
than 15 miles from Rutland.
It is very
right?
true. Yes.
I don't know. Not helping. I'm not being very helpful
Yeah,
right now.
and this is to be true. I mean, I think this is your point as well, which is like it's as the crow flies. It's not based upon the actual roads.
Right. If you were talking, and even if you were talking about the difference between like Middlesex and Waterbury and Montpelier, like you might see them pop up along sort of those interstate exits because that's generally how people drive. But when you get further into the towns, it's not as populous.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think what we can tell Gabe to ask for or licensing to ask for.
As you've said, it's going to be so context specific depending on tourism flows and whatnot. You can also think of, is there a simplifying rule that the board can apply to just kind of decide these things right off the bat if certain very obvious conditions are met? One could be, and I think the test will work in this case, if an establishment is proposing to move from a municipality with multiple establishments of the same type to an opted-in town that has zero, that's almost per se an improvement because you've gone from an area of concentration to an area where the municipality anticipated concentration didn't yet get. So that saves you some thinking, but it doesn't, if that works in this case or in future cases, but again, that doesn't resolve the close case. And so I think, staff could speak with you guys individually about what metrics would you want to see in the next one of these, if it were a little bit closer.
If we ask for the type of data that you're talking about, like the 15-mile radius, that's just the data we're asking for, right? We can still make a decision within what we have. Okay.
I mean, what we have here is, Gabe saying, well, I'm not sure what the board's going to want to know, but at least give us the town and the surrounding towns.
Right. Okay. So I wasn't sure if what you were asking for is like, here's the criteria or like just this is the information we want. So I'm sorry for
No, I just like, my hope is to push as much of this as the kind of affirmative duty onto the, perspective or the applicant instead of us having to do it internally.
Yeah.
But again, because of the unique nature of this question, we're probably all going to have to do internal analyses as to what we think is appropriate. But at a minimum, it seems like a kind of 15-mile catchment area surrounding where the proposed location is, best they can do to get population from the 15-mile radius.
So yes,
Okay.
sorry,
Yep.
I was thrown.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's consistent with what the comments that we heard from when we had our initial rule is like, you should really be thinking about like just a little bit more regional instead of municipal.
It would be helpful to know too, if a retailer is relocating to somewhere that is sort of a center of commerce,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And part of that analysis that if there's a closed case, for example, it'd be good to know if you're talking about someplace that this is where commerce happens, or you're talking about someplace that's where you're adding, a second retailer to a rural place or a more populated place, like that sort of information.
Not that it's like totally essential, but does Polney have a LCC, local cannabis commission, sort of,
If they do, it's been vetted, right? I'm trying to remember whether they do.
They don't really have the ability to deny an application for any like subjective reason.
I mean, I think this is the first step
Okay.
in the process, right? There's just a
Yeah,
hurdle.
it was unclear to me whether they even had a like specific location.
Don't even think I don't think they've moved that far. It's really very preliminary, and then the licensing is going to get, all of the application materials, and we'll go through all the motions.
So then we're approving the move to Pulteney. So if they end up saying, well, we couldn't get anything in Pulteney, we'll go to Tinmouth or something, then it would have to come back before us.
They would, and I think even if they go as planned at Pulteney, that'll come back before you. Right now, they just kind of need a kind of committal decision so that they know whether to invest resources in the site right now. And so, of course, once they're set up, there'll be an inspection, there'll be a verification that they're compliant with local zoning, and all the things that anybody else would get.
Okay.
Given what we heard from the Department of Health, do we want to know, in a case where there's multiple retailers in a town, how many are going to be within a certain mileage of a school? Obviously not within 500 miles, because we know that is outlined or 500 feet. Yeah. But we know that's outlined in statute, but do we want to know if we're creating density around places that are centers where youth are?
It would be nice, except on this one, we're just saying the whole town is up for grabs now.
Right, but we're talking about two things. We're talking about improving this one and what we want to see in the future, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think about knowing if there's just how many are around a school or in the neighborhood of a school?
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as we can define what that is. It just a school, or what's the slippery slope to other places youth congregate?
I mean, personally, I think it's school because those don't move as often as childcare and other things do. But we heard more than that from the Department of Health, but the school seems to be like the most, like, we know that those don't move very often.
Yeah. I mean, and with the school, I think the important thing is, do kids have to walk by it versus is it like on the backside of the school where like no one's ever walking? So I don't know. Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with this. We don't know the actual address of this place, but I think I think that's all right for now.
We're still not creating density in that area.
That's true.
That was the problem that we heard from.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right. Well, so for now, if this comes up again, 15 miles from the proposed location, population of those versus the existing where it's moving from.
Okay.
And just any information about where schools might be in relation to where the location is going.
Yeah, it might be nice to get like a heat map kind of that you could zoom in and out on to see,
Yeah.
schools and other kind of areas of interest that might, and they might be very.
There's a nice
The
tool.
state has that.
Yeah, there is. I was using it earlier.
Nice,
Yeah, it's
There's
VCGI.
all kinds of
Yeah.
fun maps you can play with.
That thing's amazing.
Okay, so I'm okay with approving this shift. Do we need a motion? Do we have a motion for that?
I move that I move that the board accept the retail location request presented to us with issuance subject to any final payment of required fees and any other contingencies.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that'll amend the license and they'll be back before you when they have a site.
Great. All right.
Well, that's that.
Nothing else, Olga?
Nothing else on my list.
All right. Well, then why don't we adjourn the meeting? Thanks, everyone.